Stay with us a minute, Billy Keller. Derek Mooney.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and the order in which they learned them is another matter. But certainly from Fianna Fáil, I mean, the one thing we knew for the last 7 years is that there was going to be a presidential election this year. We knew that Michael D. Higgins was term limited. We knew that there probably wouldn't be one candidate agreed amongst everybody. So therefore there was an election. So when did the planning start? And Fine Gael can say with some justification, well, they started planning in March or April, but they had fairly much made up their mind it was going to be Mairead McGuinness, and they had a process that guaranteed was Mairead McGuinness. And Fianna Fáil just sat and twiddled and wasn't too sure. And one moment the Taoiseach said, well, Fianna Fáil doesn't have a right to nominate a candidate, although it has more than 20 Oireachtas members. And then we couldn't be in there, there could be this and then a black person.
Let's ask Billy Keller that. Billy Keller.
And I'm very proud as the Labour Party to have been associated with that.
Derek Mooney, you want to come in there?
Yeah, there's a reason why political parties do negative campaigning, because it works. When a party does negative campaigning and it doesn't work, then I think you've got serious questions to ask yourself.
Does it depend just what type of election? Because like if you look at Marie's party there, every little hurts in the 2011 campaign.
The Tesco ad, yeah.
Yeah, sure. It worked to a degree.
Yeah, but you have to.
It's for marginal shifts rather than overall victory.
Well,
isn't it?
the first it is who are you trying to shift? What voters are you trying to move? And is this the message that's going to get them from there? And it was quite clear by the time we had the cab rank stuff and we had the stuff about Aras, etc., that at that stage Catherine Connolly was already in a fairly commanding lead. So how were you going to break voters away from her to vote for what was clearly the only alternative, Heather Humphreys? And by attacking Catherine Connolly in that way was not the way it was going to do it. You are not going to persuade somebody who is leaning towards Catherine Connolly, because they've perceived Catherine Connolly from the first debate as being the most articulate, the person with the clearest message, not necessarily a message everyone agrees with. I mean, I know a lot of people in my own circle of friends who voted for Catherine Connolly and decided very early on that they were voting for Catherine Connolly because they thought she was the most intelligent, they thought she was the most articulate, they liked the fact that she spoke Irish, they thought that she would be calm, they thought a whole range of reasons in that. And then for Fine Gael to come and say, no, but look what she did as a barrister, it was not going to work. And I just intrigued. I think Martin has a really difficult job to do here as a minister, which is to defend the Fine Gael campaign. And as director of elections, he's not going to do anything other than that. But the simple fact of it is that as a campaign, it failed. And it failed for a couple of reasons. Number one, because it was built around another candidate. And Mairead McGuinness is a completely different candidate. It's coming from the same party, but not necessarily the same background, but is far more articulate. I mean, people go back to the very first debate and people were struck by the fact that you had one very articulate speaker and two relatively inarticulate speakers, all of whom were eminently qualified, all of whom are really good people. That's the whole point. These are decent, honourable people.
Yeah, it proves the Oscar Wilde thing. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. Yeah. And all you're hearing is Catherine Connolly. Yeah. Half the people are only paying 50% attention to what's going on around them, and they just keep hearing the name, so it actually reinforces.